That's right. You know, so here we are. Frank is not with us. Therefore, the meat and potatoes of this is not going to happen until Frank arrives. He's late. He should be coming soon. He has connection issues. Hopefully, he can resolve them very briefly. So I'll have to yammer at you in the meantime. So, yes, because I mean, on this topic, Frank is the expert. I do not know anything more about it than what he's told me. Well, I suppose I do know a bit. I mean, I know of, yes, I do know a little bit about the topic. I mean, Frank is actually German and has actually autistically collected science fiction of the era. And he knows about it and knows the authors and knows what sort of things they're writing about. And that is what this stream is about. So we are a bit hobbled without Franco himself. However, I mean, I can introduce it a little bit. So let's say, really not just science fiction of the Third Reich, but I would say science fiction, German science fiction of the early 20th century is more broadly what we're on about, though there was specifically a type around the era of the Third Reich as well it has a certain kind of flavor to it, let's say. And they were not oblivious to these things. Attempted moon landings, traveling to Mars, space in general. The V1 project, von Braun's rocketry, etc., were not wholly, they were not oblivious to this outside of just trying to hit targets in London or whatever, right? Not just purely as a wartime instrument. They had a vision and knowledge of these things. And in fact, after the war, I think it's pretty common knowledge that all the best scientists on both sides of the Cold War were Germans, that they just each were looted out of Germany by either the Russians or the Americans. And these were really the great visionary scientists, space scientists, really. And people with this kind of vision. They were the greatest of their kind in terms of like mechanical engineering and knowing how to do the things that will actually bring that future about. They were the greatest for it, and they always have been. German engineers. Musk's unsung engineer, I think, is a German guy for his rocket program. I forget his name, sadly. There was like two people really running it in an engineering sense. One was German, and I'm pretty sure he was the brains of the operation. Watching a documentary on it. Who was the other guy? I can't remember what the other guy was. But anyways, they just tend to, notorious for their engineering and things like this. But in terms of science fiction, they were not oblivious to that. And it was part of the culture of the day as well. As, ever since, when science fiction arguably began with what? Was it Jules Verne or, no. What? I can't even remember now. I should know this. I'm drawing a blank. Sort of arguably around the 19th century, maybe earlier. Wasn't there there's a story by who's the French author? Shit, can't remember my names now. Famous romantic French author who had arguably one of the first science fiction stories. Anyways, that doesn't matter. Like science fiction, it requires something of a technological post-industrial society, or industrial, I should say, not post-industrial. So it is kind of something as fantasy born out of the possibilities of the future related to technology. Both good and bad, because you can have dystopian. So, oh, there's Franco. I guess we're in business. I don't have to blather for too long. Frank.
Right. Well, I had some connection problems in the other room, so I went into my bedroom and set it up here.
Oh, well, to hell with that other room. To hell with it. We're here now.
I don't know what's going on. Yes, I brought a couple books. I just heard what you said about science fiction's definition, right? It basically being fantasy from a technological perspective.
Well, maybe that's not sufficient. Some of it is like that. What do you think? We should know this. We write science fiction.
I do not have that book here because it's older than the Third Reich, right? But I have an old German collection of sci-fi stories from the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
and it has an essay in the beginning which talks about what is science fiction.
Really?
And it basically
What?
says science fiction is fairy tales, is modern fairy tales from a scientific rather than a magical perspective,
Okay. Right. Yeah. Right.
which is a definition I feel is rather accurate, right?
Yeah. I suppose. Not even necessarily though, but yes, it's a very hard thing because you have the kind of Star Wars science fiction where there is also unexplainable magic going on as well, or you know what I mean, like but
Yeah.
yes, it's a very hard thing to define as usual. But yeah, no, that's not bad, not bad. Certainly, it is fantasy with a speculative future.
It is a similar tradition, right? It comes from the same direction, essentially.
Yeah, but so we're here specifically, and people want to know about science fiction of the Third Reich, of which you are about the only person I would know that would know anything about this.
Yeah.
Great.
Now,
So what do you, what do you,
first
what do you,
things first,
how
I
would you,
would
how would you preface it, or how would you describe, how would you talk about this?
right. First things first. I'm not an expert on the topic by any means, but I'm a sort of a casual collector,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, let's say 5 or 6, I found a list online about science fiction written in the Third Reich,
Yep.
and I got interested. So I started hunting down a couple books on secondhand online bookstores. And then bit by bit, I just kept buying science fiction books from that time.
Mhm.
I've read a few. I have not read all of them yet that are in my collection, and there
Yep.
are still some I know about that I want to add to my collection. But I think I've got enough contact with the topic to
And
have
like
developed
very
a
very few,
certain
very few have been
interest.
translated to English.
Yes,
Very few are in English, right? Is that
none,
true?
none, zero up to this
None,
point.
none at all. Right? None.
None.
Right. So this is
Um,
only someone you need someone like Frank if you're in the English world to
yeah,
even know anything about these at all.
like very
So
few
this
of
is
them
great.
have even been reprinted.
Yeah.
They're
Really.
so your best bet is just to go to some secondhand bookstore and browse the shelves, or go to an online secondhand bookstore and search for it and hope you find something. Now there are books
Wait.
and pulp magazines that I know something about, but that I don't have yet. Pulp magazines specifically are difficult to hunt down in complete editions, right? And
So was
in
there Third Reich? Was
in
there Third Reich pulp
States,
magazines? Was there Third Reich pulp magazines
yes,
as well? There was. Okay.
yes, plenty.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
it's a tradition that goes back to the late 19th century in Germany, and it's a tradition that still exists. We talked about this before, I think,
Yeah.
how the
Yeah. We
pulp
did.
magazines are still a thing in Germany, but they're a little bit different here. So I think that's a good angle to start with, right? Um, in the Third Reich, there were two science fiction pulp magazines specifically. Most of them were just adventure, like characters going on adventure in various parts of the world. That was a very popular genre, especially for younger readers. Um, Science fiction, we had what's it called? Sun Ko, the Heir of Atlantis, which is some half Mayan guy who is basically the heir to Atlantis, wakes up in modern times and he has a nuclear driven
Oh,
plane with which he flies around the world and goes on adventures and fights bad guys like international bankers, uh, foiling their plans.
nice. Love that.
So, yeah, and the way those are constructed is it's not like the American pulp magazines where you have, like in Weird Tales, right? You have short stories by different authors. You have
Yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft in there. You have Robert E. Howard. You have Clark Ashton Smith.
Yeah.
Sunko is all written by the same guy. Locke Myler was his pen name.
Wow.
And he wrote the entire series, and each issue is a longer short story, let's say a novella-length story featuring Sun Ko. And then the
Okay.
next issue would be a continuation, right? It's episodic. It's an episodic telling of adventures of the same character. So
Adventures.
we've had
Okay.
Sunko, the Heir of Atlantis, and then later on, the same author, after Sunko was finished, did another series with a similar hero going similar sci-fi-like adventures.
Well, how? In what way are they sci-fi? In sort of a, what's the sci-fi element of them exactly?
Sort of the high-tech gadgets that the protagonists
Right.
have. Right?
Okay. Right.
With Sunko having this nuclear-powered-driven airplane with which he flies around the world.
All right.
And then there's issues where he goes on a submarine cruise, right? In typical Jules Verne style.
So this is like speculatively nuclear
So
power before we had before they split the atom.
before it was even a thing, yes.
Speculative nuclear
Yeah.
power, just
Yeah.
guessing that it was possible. I see. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so that was one. That's a pulp
Science
magazine.
fiction, and that's like those are the two only science fiction pulp magazines of the flip right. Everything else that was pulp was usually adventure, just dudes going on adventures in the real world. Think Indiana Jones, but with some mystical stuff, right?
Right.
And I think introductionally, at one point I bought this book,
Okay.
a bibliography of utopias and fantasies from 1650 to 1950, which is the definitive list, bibliography of all German fantasy and science fiction that was printed between these years. So this includes pretty much everything that was done in the Third Reich. It has, you can browse by, like usually they're by author name, right? It's just list.
Right. Oh, okay.
And here in the back, you can browse by year. So
Ooh,
that's a good way to just
very
hunt
German.
down. And
very Germanly organized. Yeah.
Yeah, it was compiled by Robert Bloch, who is the first and foremost researcher on old sci-fi and fantasy, right? Pre-1950 sci-fi and fantasy in Germany.
Right, I recognize the name. Yeah.
I like the back here because it shows a couple of covers.
Yeah, great.
So,
and so, what are typical of the stories? Are they like just very similar to the same Western version from the same era, or is there anything more unique about them? Did they have even like a Third Reichish value tint to them? Like were they
some do, yes.
swastikas, saving the world from
some do. There's the father of who's generally called the father of German space opera, Stanislaus Bialkowski. He had a very National Socialist slant in the values of his characters, right, and the message his stories conveyed. But they are set in a usually not very specified future, sort of far too near, right? A future in which we have spaceflight and Europe is united under one empire. And it's this one. I haven't fully read it yet, but so far it's very interesting. Krieg im All, war in space. So
space is all in German. All.
Good.
Never knew that.
Yeah, this is All. It means everything, right? Space.
Right.
It's the universe.
Interesting. Yeah. It's big. It's thick.
And it's written in this beautiful old,
Gothic font.
the tour.
I ordered some.
You get used to it. I can read it fluently at this point.
I have. I'd love to read it. I have some old German books. I got some of those old those nudist culture books. The ones from the 20s and 30s where they're all.
Oh yeah, you showed me.
What's that called again? I can't remember the name of it. But it's all written in that.
Kultur. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah,
Kultur, free body culture
or whatever. And they're all like out working in the fields and they're naked and stuff. and it's great photos. But like the font, I'd love to be able to read it. But I can't. I just have to adore, look at how nice it looks. But yeah, they did actually use those fonts, which is great. I mean, it's just totally German. So there wasn't a, you wouldn't say, would you say there was any particularly unique quality to the science fiction?
That's an interesting question, because the question I probably am not yet qualified to conclusively answer, right? Because I haven't read enough yet, but the stuff I did read, it has its own German vibe, and it has some interesting ideas about spaceflight and ideas about planets. In fact, let me grab one more. There's, for example, I encountered something interesting in this book, Weltraum Unimos by Fritz Enskert.
Looks good.
It's about a guy who accidentally discovers a spaceship that lands on Earth and enters it. Right, so it gets transported to Mars.
Yep.
And on the ship, he talks to some Spanish guy who was also abducted by those aliens. And the Spanish guy tells him that those Martians, they actually want to take over Earth because Mars is dying. And then they work together to sabotage the Martian plans, to sort of fight for humanity, right? Defeat the aliens for humanity. So that's a very protect your nation sort of vibe. That's quite in line with the ideas of the time.
Yep.
And what I encountered in this book is the idea of the world ice theory, which was an esoteric theory about planets that came up in the early 20th century, and that some people in the National Socialist Party did embrace. It's an idea that the planets are made of ice, and the stars heat them up and make the ice melt, and then life comes on the planets. But when a planet ages, it freezes over again. It's some weird stuff. It's weird esoteric stuff that I don't 100% get what it's trying to go for, but that's the idea. And in the book, Mars is an aging planet that's about to, freeze over, that's losing its energy. And so the Martians want to go to Earth, which is a younger planet that's still young and healthy and energetic. So yeah,
not a bad theory. Maybe that's what they did.
Yeah.
Not a bad theory. That would make a good story right there. That's a good idea.
So,
see, I would expect
so in
the
that
Germans.
regard,
I don't
it
expect,
does use, in that regard, it does use a very esoteric theory of space that wasn't mainstream in any other country at the time, or at any other time, really.
Yeah, it reminds me of I got that book of sort of Third Reich esotericism by is it Carl Willigut or something like that?
Oh, and yeah, Carl Willigut. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got some crazy theories in there, that like theories about the origins of the Earth, and what was it, that the original people were basically sort of like angelic cyclopses. I mean, there's some wacky stuff in there, like stuff I've never heard of. I don't know where they got it from or what the source of it is, but it's cool. It has the original like Lord's Prayer to Odin basically and stuff, I guess. And it's always something interesting and unique. What I would expect from the German perspective, not just necessarily Third Reich perspective, but even then, because that was like certainly combining it with future utopianism and technology, would be like, was there much hopeful speculation about creating like a kind of, hyper future? Well, I guess anywhere of that era was thinking that way.
Yeah, a little bit. A lot of now I haven't read them yet, but I have a bunch of books in my collection that focus on near future high-tech inventions, right? From the blurbs I've read, the plots are usually about a German scientist discovering some really cool technology, and building a machine that
Like they do in
uses
real
the
life.
technology, and
Yeah.
then foreign agents are trying to steal it, and then you get the sort of industrial espionage plot around that. And
Right.
these were usually pretty good selling, right? A
Mhm.
lot of these became bestsellers at the time. So people liked the ideas. People liked science fiction. It was sort of mainstream at the time.
So these books that you're collecting, like they're not easy to find now. They wouldn't be considered classic in Germany, or would they? Is there a
No,
popularity?
no,
Is there?
no. They wouldn't
No,
be
they're not.
considered classic. The problem with Germany, more so than the Anglophone areas, is that science fiction and fantasy were, until recently, considered to be less worthy genres, right? So academia has pretty much ignored it, apart from a few cool people like Mr. Lochner. Um,
Like Mr. Who?
and schools never taught it, and yeah, publishers never really reprinted it.
Well, it's the same here,
And
but I would say it's the same in the Anglosphere, except not as bad, where it hasn't been totally ignored. Like
except not
seriously,
as
like
bad, yeah.
yeah, and the ones who only make it through and get remembered, it seems like Lovecraft is very extremely popular after being like largely ignored and like in his lifetime he was certainly considered probably unsuccessful. I would say, he was only getting published in these little
Yeah.
in these little rags and stuff. So he's got a kind of cult popularity since recently or whatever, and some people like that, but I don't think you can. Maybe in some universities you can like get a PhD in Lovecraft. It's not like you can get one in
Yeah.
Joyce or some other modernist joker. Like, but generally, it's one of these things that normal people like fantasy will put in the will label as somehow or for some reason a juvenile activity. But again, it makes me think of like say the likes of von Braun, people that really were responsible for the space race and the moon landing and the great leaps in engineering that involving rocketry and getting people into space, and how they were all Germans. And I just thought, well, they must have been inspired by something. I mean, I know they were taken,
Yeah.
the simple mechanics of engineering, figuring it out and getting it to work and everything else. But I'm sure they had
One
their
thing that's
own.
really quite fascinating is there was a film, a short film made in 1941, I think. It was supposed to
Mhm,
be a longer film, but then the
mhm.
war came and we sort of ran out of budget and time and stuff and said, okay, yeah, we'll just release what we have as a short film. It's called Weltraumschiff 1 startet. Spaceship 1 starts. And it's basically a hard sci-fi film about a spaceship starting and doing one round around Earth and then going back down again. So there's not much plot to that film at all. They just wanted to show spaceship flying. Uh, it's available on YouTube if you search for it, and it
Okay.
just goes for like 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. That's pretty interesting. They have all the little sets, right? They built a little model spaceport.
It's very
Um,
German. They just want to show the
they
mechanics of
yeah,
the
yeah, they
mechanics
just
of a
want to
ship
show the
flying, and that's
mechanics
it.
of starting a spaceship, and it's quite quaint and funny from a modern perspective because the way they start the spaceship is they have a huge ramp and then they have the spaceship go up the ramp and leave orbit instead of having it start straight.
I might have seen that somewhere. That sounds familiar. But yeah, is there like I was gonna ask like if they're say the likes of von Braun and them again, like in their inspiration, or I know they were taken and put into a space program from like what was a war rocket program. But I know he was interested in rockets and leaving the Earth's orbit since he was young. And you ever see them those later on in the '60s, those Disney videos? There's all the Disney films with von Braun and these other German guys and their plans that they had after after the Saturn rocket program to have like nuclear powered ships and outside of Earth's orbit, and it would take people to other planets. And they had all the models; they had it all completely mapped out. I'm sure, knowing them, that it would have worked. and all this never came to fruition. They didn't get the funding, or it didn't happen, or whatever. But it's all
Yeah.
in this Disney video. Pure, excellent,
Yeah.
positive.
Hitler
Speculative.
actually wanted to explore space and stuff like that. He also had a very big fascination with
Did
the
he talk
topic.
about
And
this? Really, I didn't know this. Tell me,
yeah,
what did he say about it?
he no, that was just his plan. His idea was, when the war is over, one day in the future, we're going to explore the planets, and we need a new frontier to explore. And space is the perfect new frontier.
I must see
We
where
have
he
the
said that.
technology,
Really,
we can do it.
is that in one of his books, or I
I
must?
I have to look it up. I have to look it up. But he did say that he did have an opinion on the space race, and he would have liked to do it.
Yeah. So if
So,
like,
which only feels natural considering that the space race of both the Americans and the Soviets was handled by German scientists, right? Who
yeah,
already had experience with rocketry and had those ideas of going to space.
yeah. That's why I always wondered, even like say through the years before I came to certain realizations that I have now, that how come with the history of it, even the recent history, and people like von Braun and them, with why is say the European Space Agency, there's a space agency a part of the EU. Obviously, they do nothing. I don't know if they
Yeah.
really, literally, what they do at all. But like, why does it seem inconceivable that Europe could have a proper space program and be getting things into space as we speak? And from what I know now, I believe it's because we are completely ruled by the financial district, business interest. It's not just that materialism rules our lives, aesthetically or morally. It's just that on top of it all, even the corporate, in the world of business itself, almost everything is based around the financial speculation, and the efficiency of a business
Yeah.
is secondary to the sort of what do you call it when they buy up a business, hostile takeovers, and then they sell it,
Yeah.
or they intentionally, the product becomes like worse and cheaper, and everything is just about middleman exploitation at every level through the whole thing. So there's no way for a
Yeah,
cohesive
that's why the
society to rally
American
around.
space program ultimately was sort of canceled too, right?
Yeah.
They just didn't want to invest any more money into it, and it's not profitable to go and explore
Yeah.
space.
So it's because
It
it's
doesn't
our
have to
rule by
be.
the
It just has to be cool. We have to do it because it is our
yeah.
destiny.
Yeah, because if you get ruled by merchants, nothing. Not only do you get these shoddy products and shoddy everything they're supposed to be doing just gets shoddier, because all they do is self-interest, greed, financial greed. You don't
Now I have
succeed at
to.
having space programs. Your German engineers can't be building your rockets. I mean, they're not able to. There's no system in place to allow them to flourish and
Now,
use
to
their genius
show the
in an
true
autistic way.
autism of how far German science fiction could go, I got this one. The Plan of Engineer Decker, right?
Ooh, okay, that's a good name.
It's about Engineer Decker. It's actually a very English sounding name if you think about it. But he's the German guy, and there's also English guys on the moon, and they're having a duel sort of who can go
Nice.
to the moon first, right? Who can establish a permanent moon base first, and who can build the more successful moon base. So they're doing that, and it's very hard sci-fi. It's very much about the realities of building a moon base, of how they thought it would be possible to do that. Um, it has full color illustrations of the landscape of the moon. It's
Oh, if only it
very
actually looked like that.
lavish.
It's a bit more
So
shite than that. It's just like shitey low hills of dust and rubbish.
yeah,
I believe there's big crevices with sort of untold depths beneath that, maybe. But the moon seems to be a largely uninteresting ball of shite.
yeah. But
Oh
this
yeah,
guy, this it's cool.
that is cool. Very cool. Yeah.
It stokes the imagination. And here in the back, I just pulled out the little sheets that were stuck in here,
Mm-hmm.
and they are plans for the
Yay!
spacecraft.
You must fulfill these plans. Is your destiny. You must build that.
It's science fiction with
You must build that, Frank.
actual plans for the spaceship. It's
Uh,
like, here, spaceship. This
cool.
is how it looks. This is the spaceship in the book, and
Excellent. That's so German and
they,
excellent.
they
Just
got
technical plan
blueprints
sitting in the back of the book.
in the book.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
So that's how hard science fiction in the Third Reich was. That's as hard as science fiction can get.
Well, I mean, those are good plans. The ship looks very Star Warsy for a 1930s.
Mhm.
It looked like a sort of like one of those X-wings or something. The mechanical librarian says the only science fiction associated with NS was the supposed time bell. What's that? I don't even know what that is. Do you know what that is? He's wrong,
Oh,
obviously. But right.
does he think about the bell, which is this sort of floating UFO that's in the shape of a bell?
Is that what it is? The time
It's
bell?
not.
I don't know.
It's not really. That's not really science fiction. That's more like an alleged actual spacecraft that we built,
Oh, right.
which I'm not sure about whether it was actually built, but
And
it's one of
why
the
do they
one
call
of the many different
right? And why do they call it the time bell?
because it's shaped like a bell. Like it literally looks like one.
All
I
right.
haven't. No,
Oh,
that's
okay.
the only thing I associate when I hear bell and science fiction from the Third Reich. I never heard it referred to as a time bell, just as the bell. So I don't
Okay.
know.
Well,
I don't know what
mechanical
he's
librarian. If we're wrong about what you're saying, you can obviously elucidate. Tell us more. But obviously, you're wrong because there was. This is what Frank is investigating and telling us about. Is there was in fact science fiction of the Third Reich, and it was
Yep.
very German in nature.
Yeah, and here's another where there's a bit of space flight, right? A spaceship invented
Ooh,
by
nice. Yeah.
and it has
Yeah.
atomic drives, and the company Data Atom is the company that built the ship, so that's what gives it the title. And
Atomic droids again before atomic energy. They were really
yeah,
big on their atomic energy. It's really
let's
amazing that they
build
didn't develop it
space
first when you think about
atomic
it.
energy. So
Yeah.
that was a
So
concept. So a lot of the science fiction was playing with technological ideas that actually came to fruition not long after.
yeah, that
Right.
is yeah. And this is one of the great things about science fiction, or one of its great purposes. Part of the great purposes of it is to speculate and then create the future as it goes, like by imagining it
Yeah.
first. Kind of, both in
Let me
theory
see.
and
What else do I have
in
here?
the German sense, obviously in the more technical sense, just like I've thought of an atomic engine, and all of a sudden, it becomes real.
Here's
What's
more
that
of
one?
a realistic one, just about
Ganymede.
the
About the what?
travels of submarine Ganymede,
Cool
which
name.
is a story about a submarine traveling,
A
and
U-boat.
yeah, and it's more of a down to earth contemporary technology sci-fi, right? But
And what's sci-fi about it? Just tech.
I mean, yeah, I think it's more of an adventure, with contemporary technology,
Oh, I see.
right?
John Gora says, "What was the deal with Tintin? Wasn't that somehow tied into time and space? I don't know. I think there's probably like a Tintin where he
Right.
goes to a
Okay.
rocket.
The thing about Tintin is Hergé, the guy who wrote Tintin,
Hmm.
I think he had certain loyalties towards the Belgian right wing, right? And he got started drawing comics while Belgium was occupied, if I remember correctly. And after the war, he invented Tintin, who whose stories are very much straddling the line between science fiction and adventure. Like most of his stories are just straight up adventure stories, right? Tintin goes to some foreign country and has an
Yeah,
adventure there.
yeah.
But
And
there are some where technology is involved. There is one Tintin story where they go either to the moon or Mars. I don't remember
yeah,
exactly. But there
yeah.
is
I
one
seem
where
to recall
they
that.
go to space.
Yeah, yeah. I seem to recall that for sure.
So I think
Um,
there's a sort of near future light sci-fi, as we could call it, sort of what we think is already possible,
yeah,
which is rather common in these technological adventure stories, where it's like, we have these technologies, and here's a story in how these technologies could lead to cool adventures, basically.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. So we got messages from Facebook. Or streaming on Facebook at the same time. I'm not sure there's any use to that. I did it last week to Facebook and Twitter at the same time, but I'm not so sure that there's much point to doing that so much as trying to just say it's on YouTube or whatever. But it's interesting. I mean, I'm doing it anyways on fucking Facebook. But Tony Two Times says, okay, which one is admin? That would be me. I am the admin. I am the admin on Facebook. And your admin generally. Space won't save you, he also says. You're wrong, Tony Two Times. You are wrong. Frank, why is he wrong? Space will save us. I can tell him. Can you
Wait,
tell him?
what?
He says space won't save you. He's being cocky. He thinks.
Pardon?
Nope.
Yeah, no. Space will save us because it is a new frontier to strive towards, and mankind needs something to strive towards.
Yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. Yeah, you need a frontier, Tony Two Times. You need that beyond
frontier. Space is the next one.
So space will save you. Thinking you don't have to go to space.
This one's interesting too. Just go ahead. Let's see.
What is it?
The Star of Africa. A fantastic novel from the year 3000, which is about. And they just have a really big nuclear energy source that appears above Africa. Yeah, that's about that energy source. Right. I haven't read it.
A nuclear energy source appears above Africa.
Yep.
That's what
and then different nations go there and try to exploit it. So a lot of these plots are really about cool technological stuff, and different nations try to exploit it. And there's this sort of struggle between all the different countries,
So it's very real.
Protagonists from different countries all trying to do the best they can for their own country with the new technology.
Oh shit! Sorry. It's very real in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
As in, this is what I expect from the German sci-fi and stuff like that. Is that in that it's, it's very grounded. It's like they're speculating about possible technology, possible events. It's that very literal German stuff. So this is what I guess I should have expected. So a bit less, perhaps, although I'm sure there's some really wild, imaginative speculation and just out there, wacky stuff as well. And a lot of it is just based around.
There is as well. I mean, I guess this is one I've read through fully and thoroughly enjoyed. It's not science fiction, I would say. It straddles the line between adventure and fantasy, but it's a grounded fantasy in a way. It's called Sakara, Among 10,000 Amazons. And just by that title, I had to have it. Like, come on, how do you not want to look like that?
And you read it?
I did read it completely. It was a banger. It's great. Interestingly enough, that book just entered public domain this year. So if I ever find the time, I might actually translate it because it's amazing. It's about a German guy joining an expedition to the Amazonas, right?
Yep, Amazonas.
And there, his expedition is attacked by Amazons, of course, savage warrior women who capture him. And he's basically introduced into this society of savage warrior women living alone in the Amazon forest as sort of the guardians of the forest, where all the different Indian tribes send their women to that community, and they don't allow men in there usually. But our protagonist, it's funny. The intro of this is funny. He's basically in the jungle for a long time, right? Doesn't have time to groom himself. His hair grows long, and then, but just the night before his expedition is attacked, he decides to give himself a shave. So the Amazons think, long hair, no beard. It's a woman. They think it passes for a woman, so that's why they capture him and stuff, just massacring him. And
nice.
Of course, the leader of the Amazons kind of finds out this is a man, and but keeps it.
Thank God we have beards, Frank. Thank God we have beards.
Yeah, and then as the story goes on, he just describes how that Amazon society works. Then at some point, he becomes the boyfriend of the Amazon queen. Of course, he fucks like half the Amazon population at one point. Um,
Okay, good
until
premise.
it comes to a civil war between the different Amazon factions, and
Right.
he gets into a sword duel with one of them, right? And hacks apart. It has a really violent fight scene where everyone is naked and they're fighting with sabers and limbs fly everywhere. And it feels like Conan, right? It feels like a Conan story, but
Mm,
set in the real world with everything written as if it's a plausible thing. So this is the closest thing I discovered to German sword and sorcery, but it still grounds
okay.
itself in the real world. So
Right.
that's a very very interesting thing,
That is interesting. Yeah. I mean, so you this is a vast
and
catalog of bizarre
thoroughly
things,
enjoyable book. I mean,
bizarre and sort of technical stories that are like strange and unique. I mean, this is
yeah.
it is really quite fascinating. Look, I just found this. It just slipped out of the onto the ground. Totally forgot about it. Absolutely classic. Look at that. You know Thor?
Oh yeah.
Look at that. I had it
Anger
on the
is his
wall for
middle
ages.
name.
It was hidden behind something just now. It slipped out onto the ground. I was like, oh my god, look at that. Someone says 22 times says there's a 10-minute delay on my comment. Well, there's all kinds of delays. My actually internet is not working as good as it should at the moment either. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, my
And
internet was total shit until I went into another room today. I don't know
maybe
what it
there's some
is.
science fiction thing going on. There's sunspots or something. Vince
Maybe
Ulam
maybe
says
the Jews
Vince.
don't want people to know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we're not. There's nothing to. All we're doing is speaking about a certain era. We are not advocating
Yeah,
politically for anything. Vince Ulam says you need to get Dr. Robert Zubrin on here. He makes an undeniable case for space. Yes, I've actually spoken with him very briefly online before, and he does make a good case. I don't think Mr. Zubrin would care for this particular stream to appear on it, but yes, I should ask him. You're right. Maybe he would. I haven't heard from him or about him for quite a while. He was even planning his own sort of Mars mission, or at least not planning one. He was doing his own research, I think, into like experimenting on humans in the desert and seeing like what's viable for survival on Mars, kind of thing. Doing his own part. Definitely have a great advocate for space. I think we would disagree on some other things, but yeah, I should ask him. Good idea. I will ask him. Not sure if he will. We're still friends on Twitter. Still follows me. Probably has me muted or something. But I will. I haven't heard anything from him for a long time. But he was a good advocate for space. Yes, as it's such a rare thing. It seems like I don't know. It seems like such an obvious thing to someone like Frank and I and others. People like us. It's natural and automatic to think, okay, yes, we must go to space. We must colonize Mars.
that's why
Um,
science fiction is important, right? I mean,
exactly, it's extremely important. These things are more important. These are right up there. I do think if we put that at number one, all like so many of the other problems would fall by the wayside. And that's how it works. You see,
now,
you have
here's
you have a
one
goal. Okay, what is
that
it?
I think really expresses in its blurb. I'm going to read parts of the blurb and just translate for you, because that expresses very much the attitude that you've kind of discovered, right? That you saw in these things. It's called Himmelskraft, which means a sky power,
Mm-hmm.
and it's again about speculative technology. And let's look at the blurb here. It says, where will the constant progress of technology lead us in the coming decades and centuries? A question which Hans Dominic, the prophet of technology, answers with his extremely successful series of energy novels about futuristic energy sources. Dominic is an engineer. He knows the material unlike any other, and he has the fantasy to predict its possibilities. And in this book, it's about having a power plant that has a series of balloons hanging above it,
Mm-hmm.
which collect the atmospheric electricity and put it into the power plant.
Jesus. I've never even heard. I've never even
Which
imagined
is a
such.
cool concept, right? But
Oh,
but that blurb where it said where it calls that science fiction author the prophet of technology, right? And and asks the question of where will technology lead us in the coming decades and centuries. This is sort of a central theme you find in German science fiction of the Third Reich. It's very much about, okay, we have all this cool technology today. What are we going to have in the future? Where is this going to lead us? It's very grounded, very trying to predict where we're going to go, right? In a realistic way. Hans Dominic specifically, he had an engineering background. He very much wrote these realistic, futuristic technology thrillers, and he was very successful. He was a best-selling author in Germany at the time. He
see this it
was,
perfectly. This what you just said as what I noticed about these books. It does perfectly encapsulate why Germans are the best and why we need them so badly for this kind of thing. In
yeah,
that their obsession with that they even when they're doing a fantasy a science fiction imagination novel for kids, it is about a possible engineering feat laid out with details and drawings on how you might possibly do it, sort of like a almost like a a scholarly thesis or a everything. It's like their world revolves around engineering or the real or possibly real and how to solve puzzles or something. I don't know. Your mind, the German mind just works in this way, I guess. It's fascinating. They're an absolutely vital component to any kind of true technological progress, I would say,
yeah,
because there's
this
not
sort of
not many
science
people can do it.
fiction, it shows you the possible path you can take, right? And it's inspiring. It's intended to be inspiring.
Yeah, inspiring, and also with like they wouldn't propose something I don't think that wasn't possible in their mind possible,
Yeah,
or you know what I mean. So
yeah,
that's like another part of it. Like they are thinking in that way. Like I want to speculate about something I think we can make real, and I want to start the path going towards making it real, which is a very von Braun was with the ultimate um, archetype of that.
talking about books for children, I actually have a sci-fi book for children here.
Oh,
It's called The Submarine of Glass, and
oh,
it's about a bunch of kids going on a trip in a submarine that has a glass bottom. So, you know, it's very light on the sci-fi. The sci-fi is basically this fantastic submarine,
mm-hmm.
but they go and look at lots of fish down there, and it's sort of educational, right? It's an adventure through the sea, and it shows you a lot of ocean creatures and illustrates them and describes them. And in this way, it sort of makes kids learn about the world in a playful manner, right?
That's great.
Um, and it has
And
illustrations. This is
the
also
illustrations
something,
are great. I could see already that they're great.
right? It's
Highly technical. Let's see.
you got those guys in their diving suits
Yeah.
exploring underwater. So yeah, this kind of thing where you have illustrations. Oh, this is gorgeous. Like just look at how gorgeous this stuff is.
Yeah. 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 It's great.
It's the kind of
Woodcut.
thing that we do with Aegeon, right? Having illustrations in your sci-fi.
Oh, you should do it. Yeah. Whenever you can. I mean, it's not necessary like, totally an adult novel sci-fi. But even
And
then you want a good.
here you get the girl having an encounter with some natives.
Right. Also predictive of modern reality.
But yeah, this is just a cute little adventure in a submarine made of glass with lots of descriptions of the ocean and stuff like that.
Oh,
Intended
that's
for
cool.
kids, but again, there were a lot of adventure novels for younger readers.
Yeah.
Was very popular. Like science fiction is just one genre that's popular in Germany at the time, right? One genre of adventure, say, and generally adventure fiction, crime novels to romances and historical fiction. There was a lot of stuff written in the Third Reich that was just really fun, real good books, and pretty much none of it got translated. None of it is, or very few of them are getting reprinted. Some of Hans Dominik's stuff is seeing reprints recently as they entered public domain. But the problem there is that most of these reprints are made by people who just slap the public domain text into a PDF file, upload that on Amazon, and then the formatting is complete ass. You've probably seen public domain texts from the English language in
Yeah,
similar editions.
yeah.
It's sort of a plague, right? Where you when you try to find a reprint of classics and you get this really lovelessly slapped together shit. It's
Yeah,
sad.
it
I
is
could
sad.
probably do a better
I never
job,
bought
better
one. I
job
never
with
bought
these.
one, but I've seen
Yeah.
them. I remember that guy Styx Hexenhammer would always be putting out these grimoires and ancient occult because he fancies himself as a Satanist or something.
Yeah.
And he would publish on Amazon continually reprints of old texts. And as far as I could see, he was just literally like he would just take a PDF directly off whatever recorded archive of the book it was, make a cover for it, just literally text on a black cover, and say, "Look, I've republished this book." And, he figures he's disseminating information, I guess, but still, he should put a little more effort in that.
Yeah, yeah.
If
You
it
want
was
your
so easy, I mean, I
old
could do that.
books to
I
look
could I
good.
could do that in a minute and like still produce at least a nicely designed, readable little book. At least,
Yeah.
I don't know if I was interested in that. I believe in you're not doing anything unless you're making original material. You're not really doing anything. This is the other thing I was going to getting at earlier when I was talking about how we don't have the culture and civilization to facilitate not only a proper industry of science fiction or an industry of anything. All our businesses are like all the goal. There's no real goals in business anymore. There's just business and money. There's not like the goals of creating something special or unique, and there's no idea of a civilization where you improve something for the people. That's lost along with the basic tribalism you need to even feel like you are people. So it's getting dissipated in this wash of just nothingness. But I mean, along with that is the idea of like passing on information, or the fact that you should be, as much as possible, creating something. You should be creating something new, and you
Yeah.
don't have to be technically an artist or consider yourself an artist, but you can be an engineer, or I mean, whatever it is you do, you should be striving to add something new. I mean, I know this. I've been accused of very much the opposite because I have my book on traditionalist Western art, and like people think I just want to press the pause button on the past and live through that forever. But that's not the case. It's just that it's the modern mindset that keeps things trapped in a stifled bubble that doesn't actually go anywhere. You do need new things, and you need to be doing stuff like these guys were.
Out here, I got my most recent acquisition, and
Oh,
the
let's see.
last one I have to show.
Last one.
It's the Sun 6 now. Um,
What's
haven't
that?
read it yet, haven't had time yet, but the blurb here in front, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
nice. Well, blurb here. It says that this is set in the year 2004, our future,
Oh, oh.
uh, where, of course, now the technology has created lots of wonders. They have power plants in the Arctic and stuff like
Is there such?
that.
There's no power plants in the Arctic, is there? Is there like a solar power plant in the Arctic, or maybe there?
I'm not sure. Maybe the Russians have something in the Arctic. So
It would be a good place for solar energy, wouldn't you think? Because all the sunlight reflected off the snow.
yeah,
You'd think it would be,
probably.
the perfect place.
But here's like in this future, of course, because there's still a trouble of resources, right? All the world needs resources, and they're finite. So an economic war breaks out between all the nations, and an inventor, a German inventor, creates a new sun above the world called the Sun Sixer. And it could become a catastrophe because a new sun this close to Earth is dangerous, right? Potential source of danger. So the creator of that sun has to solve the problem of his creation becoming dangerous.
That's cool. That's a cool
And
idea.
it's a very cool idea. They create a new sun as sort of a source of energy, right? And then it grows into a problem, and they have to solve the problem they created through technology,
Hmm.
which is sort of an angle of warning against too much experimentation, perhaps, or that you have to be responsible with your technology. So there, again, it's a very now creating a sun just in the atmosphere is a little bit far-fetched, but the whole scenario this happens in is again this very grounded idea, right? This very realistic. Okay, we need resources, we need energy, so we're gonna use technology to create something.
Yeah. No, and it's very like pretty much all the stories that weren't sort of an adventure story were this kind of possible technological innovation
Yeah.
and stuff. Pretty much all of them. So it just goes
Now
shows
there's
you what.
plenty more in existence, of course, that I do not own yet. My collection, I grow it whenever I have the chance, right?
Oh, I'm
But
sure there must be others that you haven't heard of. Yeah, there must be all
yeah,
kinds.
but the ones I showed off are the ones I have. There are probably a bunch that where it's questionable whether they still exist, right? A
Hmm.
lot of libraries were hit during the war,
Right.
so some books are lost. And then is, of course, the question, how many private people bought those books? If they're no longer available in libraries, maybe these people even know what they have.
Yeah, probably not. How many have just been thrown in the bin like and lost it that
Because,
way? It's
yeah,
a
because
real hit.
a lot of these books a lot of old books, people just have them and they sit there and they don't even know that it's maybe a lost treasure or something like that.
Yeah, like most
One
people
time
don't.
I picked up,
What?
it's not
Go
a
on.
sci-fi book, but I picked up a book at a secondhand bookstore in Frankfurt, and in 1941, I opened up the first page, and out fell two letters from the author to a friend of his.
Oh,
And the friend of the author lived in the broader area of Hessen, so he was in the area, which means apparently the guy who put up that book for just €2 um, at the secondhand bookshop, he probably didn't even look inside. He probably didn't even know that his grandfather or something, that his grandfather knew this author, and the author sent him a signed copy of the book, and there were two letters, private letters, between his grandfather and the author tucked in there. It he didn't even know that, right? He just sold the book on the secondhand bookstore, and I picked it up and
oh, I've
private letter.
I've 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 picked up
So
absolute gems. I've picked up absolute gems at secondhand bookstores. From the store owner having no clue what he's doing, basically, and
yeah,
not caring or not knowing about some of the true classic stuff. Like I have it's losing its binding a little bit. I have to get it fixed up, but I have a version of Dante's Inferno, drawn by Dore, which is really like a
oh,
classic. Yeah, it's
nice,
it's fucking amazing. Like
yeah.
big and excellent. And it needs to be rebound and all, but I think I got it for like €10 or something in this place. This guy just didn't have a clue what it was. I don't know why, because it's it actually is still bound. It still works and everything. And there's a few I have like that. Oh, what's another one? A few others that because I
Yeah,
actually I kept going back to the same bookstore because I knew the guy didn't have a clue. He
yeah,
kept putting the wrong
yeah,
prices on. I think he was only interested in what was he interested in? He was more interested in music. He sold books and records, and he was more of a record guy, basically.
right.
Is what it was.
Yeah, I find the book I found there with the private
Yeah.
letter stuff, and it's an especially sad case because you know whoever sold this probably inherited it from grandpa or whoever, who who had this correspondence with an author published during the Third Reich. So there's sort of history, a personal family history in there, right? And just selling that off for a couple bucks, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, a couple
When you say
bucks.
a
Yeah, like
family
why even bother
history,
selling it all? Yeah, it's cheap and measly and shitty.
like I have so much stuff from my grandpa that I don't really care about that much, but I'm never going to sell it because it's grandpa's old collections. He used to collect stamps and coins, and I got his collections, and I will keep them, and I don't give a shit what they're worth. I will not sell them. They are grandpa's legacy, and therefore I keep them.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. But and you certainly have cast a light on German science fiction, I guess, of the era of Third Reich science fiction. As much as we can know. I mean, there's lots we don't know about.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
there's also lots I still don't know about. I have to expand
I
my
mean,
collection and
yeah,
read more stuff.
maybe there's a German Lovecraft out there that's a forgotten. You can always find
I
find
have
these
not yet
heroes
found
hidden.
anything. I have not yet found anything that goes into the weird fiction angle. I've been looking for a long time, but I have Loch's book where he basically lists all German sci-fi and fantasy ever made before 1950.
Right.
So I'm using that to find titles that sound interesting, and then I just go hunt them down.
Yeah.
There are a couple that I have on my list of wanting to have them, but just haven't found a good offer yet. There's one guy in Austria who sells a lot of classic old sci-fi, and his prices are ridiculous because he knows what he has, right? So there's a single book of his can go up to 300 euros.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah. There's no way.
So that's actually a collector who knows the value of the things he has.
Maybe it's really that good though. I don't know if you can read snippets of it and get some idea.
Yeah.
Maybe it's worth 300. I don't know.
There's one called Tuzup 38 or 36, something like that, which is a dystopia that was written during the Third Reich and that got the approval of being published because at the time you had to get the approval, right? Whether it's ideologically questionable or not. And they said, yeah, no, that's fine. It depicts a future where humanity has been replaced by robots and
Hmm.
efficiency has become the number one thing that everyone chases after. And this is
Oh.
sort of a robotic dystopia where everything just chases the golden goose of efficiency. And the protagonist is a human who finds some life, I think, in the shape of a little bird and tries to sort of value organic life again and break out of this uh, dystopia of efficiency. And it's a very cool dystopia, right? It's a very cool concept.
It
I
is.
want to have that book. But
It's worthy of like.
the
It's
only
worthy of
one I
writing your own.
found was $300. So
Yeah, you should see about that. You should see if you can get it. Yeah, and certainly you could write it your own story with on the theme of it. But like
yeah.
my favorite science fiction author of all time, I think I've said, is Stanislav Lem from Poland,
Oh
who
yeah,
was
he's great. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and he had so many like his were so I don't know political and psychological and humorous. They had everything in them. It seemed like, and it was like very cleverly thought out. He really took it very seriously. It seems. But even then, even one of his books I got that I did not get at the time, that I can appreciate more now, just from the way things are in the world, is Jesus, I can't remember the title, but it's something about the Cold War, and it's talking about the mindset of sort of the Americans and the Soviets from the Soviet point of view, because he was behind the Iron Curtain, I guess, at the time, and just talking about the levels you have to go to, which is like this is what people do, it seems, and you can see this at work in the world now, where they instead of breaking a premise or a law they've set up for themselves, they will go to outrageous lengths and doing all these mental gymnastics and building bridges and just entire incredible complex fortifications, defending an idea, a terrible and flawed idea, like to an extreme before they give up on it. And it sort of shows that. It shows like it's sort of like about the espionage and the you've got this bifurcation of thought, say, between capitalism and communism in this book, and it just explores the ways on either side they will go, the lengths they will go to destroy the enemy, and to hang on to their belief, both of them, before they acquiesce in the slightest. And it has dawned on me recently that this is really how most people are when they establish a belief, even if it's flawed and stupid, and once it's set in their brains, they will like work hard to defend it for a long time before they give up on it, which is funny, even like if it's really dumb. Just sort of once it's taken hold. Like myself, I'm more of a person that I don't know. It's not like I change my beliefs all the time. I don't know. I don't work in that way. If I immediately see a good reason to not believe in something, I will, basically. I guess it's hard to explain. But Stanislav Lem, a great genius, in so many different ways and types of works he did. So he's not a Third Reich author, but I still think he's my favorite of all time. And he was like,
there's a lot of like Eastern European Cold War era authors that were also really good, and a lot of it is also untranslated from a Bulgarian friend of mine. I know there was good science fiction in Bulgaria too, communist Bulgaria.
What about Germany, post-war Germany then?
East Germany also has. I have one East German book from 1949, sci-fi book.
Oh, okay.
And I think I have one West German one too. That's about UFOs. But generally, the West German stuff became very Americanized at some point. Probably around the 60s. We very much started to just copy the trends of Anglo-American sci-fi.
Right.
So at that point, it becomes a little bit less interesting to me because it lacks the unique perspective, right?
Yeah.
I still think the East German stuff is interesting because it has that different perspective of the socialists, right?
Yeah.
Although there's one, I think it was 1960s. Yeah, I think it's a 1960s German TV show called Raumpatrouille Orion, Space Patrol Orion, which is a black and white Star Trek style show. So basically, we had our own Star Trek, and it's very cool, actually. The coolest thing about it is how creative they were in building the sets. Now it's black and white, so they have a lot more leeway with just styling things up to look sci-fi. The colors don't have to be right. It's black and white anyway. And they used a lot of household appliances to and just put them up in a way that makes them look like sci-fi implements. Where like the communicator and the keyboard and everything is just made up of regular household stuff. For one of their doodads, they used a clothes iron, and it became something like a communicator. So
just out of
it's
cheapness,
really cool. It's very inventive.
Oh, inventive. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't look big at all.
There was many versions of Star Trek. Apparently, ever seen Turkish Star Trek?
No,
all those ones.
I have not seen Turkish Star Trek.
You should look it up on YouTube. It's pretty funny. There's actually a Turkish ripoff of almost everything, like Star Wars, Star Trek, of all the various Western big franchises. There's a Turkish version, which is usually quite hilarious and like literally very close ripoff. Like there'd be like Turkish people, like the Turkish Star Trek has like the mini skirts and the the red tights suits and it's like very visibly just we're gonna make our own version exactly, which is pretty funny thing.
The female characters in Raumpatrouille Orion, they look so 60s, man. Their haircuts, their clothes, it's so 60s, but very good.
At least the 60s, it was still
an extremely great theme song.
Yeah, they would, of course. Yeah, of course. They were good at stuff like that back then. So this is the arts we have. The simple arts we have lost. The pop arts. A nice, catchy, television
Just that
theme
kind of
song. You
stuff.
hear the best theme songs to some shitty TV show back in the 60s or 70s. That'd be like a better song than you'll hear as like a $1 million produced supposed pop song today.
And
And it's just
it's so funny, 60s and 70s styles look very futuristic today because
yeah, yeah,
they have that
yeah.
vibe. Today everything looks very mundane, but back then
Well,
they tried to
we've
make it
lost. We have
look
no hopeful
cool.
future. We have no hopeful future. We have no even design of a society that's going to strive towards a sensible goal of any kind. That's why we're basically waiting for the whole thing to suffer a disaster
Yeah,
and regroup in
crumble
some
down
hopefully
so
sensible.
from the ashes something better can rise.
Yes, we have to. Again, we have to completely do away with the whole basis of our value system, and I don't know. That's another whole other subject. I think we've discussed
Whole other
as much as
topic.
we can.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a whole other
Yep.
topic. So we've talked about German Third Reich science fiction as much as we know about it, and it's interesting. It's very slightly dry, not and but from an engineering perspective and
It's
technical
visionary. Visionary
and
is the
visionary.
word
Exactly,
that
it's
I would use to
visionary.
describe it.
It is visionary in the immediate possible sort of short term future, and yes, it is excellent in its way, and it's something we should be happy to know about because that's about all we have for now.
Yeah,
Seeing as it's in German, and we'll
to
never
all
hear about it
our
again.
non-German viewers, I think unless I actually get to the point where I have time to translate some of this stuff, your best bet for experiencing Third Reich science fiction is to watch that short film that they made in 1941. It
Yeah, well,
is on YouTube. It's called Weltraumschiff 1 startet, which means Spaceship 1
Spaceship
starts.
One. Okay, I will look at that Spaceship One. I'll research that.
I don't think you're going to find it if you Google it in English, but
Oh, okay. I have to do the German. Well, I'll get you
I,
to send me the German. Most people do
I,
not
I
have this
will
luxury.
send you the German link and then
Maybe I'll post it in
you
one of the chats and the chat.
disseminate it. Yeah.
That's the best we can do. But yeah, that's it for now, I guess. That was science fiction of the Third Reich, as much as we know about it. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There was no ladies listening to that. Jesus Christ. Goodbye.
Goodbye.